The hum of the private jet's engines vibrated through the cabin as Chloe adjusted her apron, her fingers brushing the crisp fabric. At 34, she'd served on enough flights to know the drill. Smile, stay invisible, keep the drinks flowing. But this flight, a transatlantic haul from New York to London, felt different. The client, Victor Grayson, was a name even she recognized. Tech billionaire, 42, known for his razor-sharp wit and a reputation for chewing up anyone who crossed him. Chloe caught her reflection in the polished steel of the galley counter, brown eyes steady, dark hair pulled back tight. She took a breath, steadying herself. The cabin smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne, a world far from her own. She stepped into the main cabin, where Victor lounged in a cream leather seat, his tailored suit barely wrinkled. His assistant, a wiry man named Paul, sat across from him, typing furiously on a laptop. Two other guests, executives, judging by their polished shoes and tense postures, murmured over documents. Victor's eyes flicked up as Chloe approached, a tray of crystal tumblers balanced in her hands. "Whiskey neat," he said, not looking at her, his voice clipped. She nodded, pouring with practiced ease, the amber liquid catching the cabin's soft lighting. "First time on a private jet?" Victor asked, his tone carrying a smirk as he took the glass. Chloe froze for a split second, unsure if he was testing her. She'd been on dozens of these flights, but something in his gaze told her he wasn't asking out of curiosity. "No, sir," she said, keeping her voice even. "I've worked flights like this for years." Victor's lips curled and he glanced at Paul, who didn't look up from his screen. "Years, huh? And still pouring drinks? Dedication or desperation?" The executives chuckled, their eyes darting to Chloe, then away. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her smile in place. "Just good at my job," she said, setting a glass in front of Paul, who muttered a thanks without looking. Victor leaned back, swirling his whiskey. "Good at your job," he echoed, his voice dripping with mockery. "Tell me, Chloe," he squinted at her name tag, "what's a woman like you dream of?" "Something bigger than wiping down trays, I bet." The words landed like a slap, but Chloe's face didn't falter. She'd heard worse from entitled passengers, though none as sharp as Victor. "I get by," she said, turning to refresh the executive's drinks. Inside, her pulse thrummed with a familiar anger, one she'd learned to swallow long ago. As she moved back to the galley, Victor's voice followed her. "Get by," he said, loud enough for the cabin to hear. "That's the spirit. Keep the world spinning for people like us." Paul snorted, and one of the executives coughed into his glass. Chloe's hands paused over the coffee machine, her knuckles whitening. She thought of her daughter, Lily, back home in Queens, probably curled up with a book under the dim light of their apartment's only lamp. This job paid for Lily's school, her clothes, the life Chloe was building for her. She didn't have the luxury of snapping back. The jet hit a pocket of turbulence, and the cabin lurched slightly. Chloe steadied herself against the counter, catching Victor's eye as he glanced up, amused. "Careful now," he said. "Don't spill anything. Wouldn't want to make a mess of my plane." The executives laughed again, and Chloe felt the heat creep up her neck. She forced a nod, retreating to the galley to prep the next round of drinks. In the narrow space, she closed her eyes for a moment, breathing through the sting. She'd dealt with men like Victor before, men who saw her as a prop, not a person. But something about his casual cruelty gnawed at her, sharper than usual. An hour later, the cabin was quieter, the executives dozing, their papers scattered. Victor was still awake, scrolling through his phone, his whiskey glass empty. Chloe approached, her steps soft on the plush carpet. "Another drink, Mr. Grayson?" she asked, her voice neutral. He looked up, his eyes narrowing as if seeing her for the first time. "You're still here," he said almost to himself. "What's your story, Chloe? Single mom? Struggling artist? Lay it on me." His tone was playful, but there was an edge, like he was baiting her. She hesitated, her hand resting on the tray. "Just a woman doing her job," she said, keeping it short. Victor leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Come on, don't be boring. Everyone's got a sob story. What's yours?" His smile was all teeth, And Chloe felt the weight of the cabin's silence, the hum of the engines amplifying the moment. She could walk away, keep serving, keep her head down. But something in her stirred, a flicker of defiance she hadn't felt in years. "I'm a single mom," she said, her voice steady but low. "My daughter's 10. She's why I'm here." Victor's eyebrows shot up, and he let out a short laugh. "That's it? Single mom, working hard for the kid? Classic." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Let me guess, deadbeat dad, tiny apartment, barely scraping by?" Chloe's fingers tightened on the tray, but she didn't flinch. "Something like that," she said, her eyes locked on his. The air between them crackled, and for a moment, Victor's smirk faltered, like he hadn't expected her to hold his gaze. Paul stirred, glancing up from his laptop. "Vic, leave her alone," he said, his voice tired but firm. Victor waved him off, his eyes still on Chloe. No, I'm curious. Tell me, Chloe, what's the big dream? You can't want to do this forever." His words were light, but they carried a challenge, daring her to step out of her place. Chloe felt the weight of the moment, the years of biting her tongue, of smiling through insults, of being invisible. She opened her mouth, her heart pounding, ready to say something she couldn't take back. She straightened, her voice low but clear. "I don't dream about being someone else, Mr. Grayson. I'm good at what I do. And I'm good at other things too." She paused, her gaze unflinching. "Like singing. I used to perform, back before life got complicated." Victor's smirk froze, his eyebrows lifting slightly. "Singing?" he said, leaning forward, his tone half mocking, half curious. "What, like karaoke at the local bar? Or are we talking Broadway dreams?" The executives stirred, one of them glancing up, suddenly interested. Paul's fingers paused on his keyboard, his eyes flicking to Chloe. She felt the cabin's attention shift, like a spotlight she hadn't asked for. "Not Broadway," she said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "Small venues, jazz clubs, that kind of thing. I had a band once. We were good." Victor let out a short laugh, but it lacked the bite from before. "A singing waitress," he said almost to himself. "Now that's a story." He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected to solve. "So why'd you stop? Stage fright? Or just not good enough?" His words were sharp, but there was a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes, like he was testing how far she'd push back. Chloe set the tray down on the side table, her movements deliberate. "Life happened," she said simply. "Priorities change when you've got a kid to raise." The cabin felt smaller, the air charged with the weight of her words. Paul cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "Sounds like you've got your hands full," he said, his voice softer than before, almost kind. Chloe nodded, her eyes still on Victor. "Yeah, but I don't regret it. Lily's worth it." Victor's smile faded, replaced by something unreadable. He leaned back, swirling the empty glass in his hand. "Fair enough," he said, but his tone had shifted, like he was reassessing her. The jet's intercom crackled, and the pilot's voice cut through. "Folks, we're hitting some weather up ahead. Might get bumpy, so please stay seated." Chloe glanced at the executives, who were already buckling their seatbelts, their faces tight with unease. Victor waved a hand dismissively. "We'll be fine. Keep the drinks coming, Chloe." But his eyes lingered on her, like he was waiting for something more. She nodded, turning back to the galley, her heart racing. Singing. She hadn't talked about it in years, hadn't let herself think about the late nights in smoky clubs, the rush of a crowd's applause. Bringing it up now felt like cracking open a door she'd locked long ago. In the galley, she busied herself with prepping a fresh pot of coffee, her hands moving on autopilot. The memory of her last performance, 5 years ago, a tiny jazz club in Brooklyn, flooded back. She'd been 6 months pregnant with Lily, her voice carrying every ounce of hope and fear she'd felt about the future. The crowd had loved her, but afterward her ex had walked out, leaving her with a stack of bills and a baby on the way. Singing became a luxury she couldn't afford. Still, she'd never stopped humming to Lily at night, her voice soft and steady, a thread connecting her to the woman she used to be. The jet lurched again, harder this time, and Chloe gripped the counter to steady herself. A glass slid across the galley, shattering on the floor. She cursed under her breath, crouching to pick up the pieces. Footsteps approached, and she looked up to see Paul standing in the galley doorway, his laptop tucked under his arm. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low enough not to carry to the cabin. Chloe nodded, brushing a shard of glass into her hand. "Fine. Just a mess to clean up." Paul hesitated, then crouched beside her, picking up a piece of glass. "You don't have to answer Victor's nonsense," he said quietly. "He gets like that when he's bored." Chloe glanced at him, surprised by the gesture. "I can handle it," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. Paul gave a small nod, standing up. "I believe you. But for what it's worth, I bet you're a hell of a singer." He offered a faint smile before heading back to his seat. Chloe watched him go, the broken glass cold in her hand. For a moment, she felt seen, not as a waitress, but as herself. It was a feeling she hadn't realized she'd missed. Back in the cabin, Victor was on his phone again, his expression unreadable. The executives were whispering about some deal, their voices tense. Chloe swept up the last of the glass and returned with the coffee pot, pouring for the executives first. As she reached Victor, he looked up, his eyes sharper now. "You ever miss it?" he asked, his voice quieter, almost serious. "The singing, I mean. The stage." Chloe paused, the pot steady in her hand. The question wasn't mocking this time. It felt like he actually wanted to know. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice soft but honest. "But I made my choices. I don't look back." Victor studied her, his fingers tapping the armrest. "Choices," he said, almost to himself. "Funny how those define us." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You know, I could make a call. Get you a gig somewhere. A real one. You just have to say yes." The offer hung in the air, unexpected and heavy. Chloe's heart skipped, but her face stayed calm. Was he serious? Or was this another game, another way to toy with her? She opened her mouth to respond, the words forming, when the jet hit another jolt, and the cabin lights flickered, casting jagged shadows across the cabin as Chloe steadied the coffee pot, her pulse hammering from Victor's offer. A gig. A real one. His words hung in the air like a glittering trap, tempting but laced with his usual condescension. She set the pot down with deliberate care, her hands steady despite the storm in her chest. "I don't need your calls, Mr. Grayson," she said, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the drone of the engines. "If I sing again, it'll be because I chose it, not because you decided I'm worth your charity." The cabin went still, the executives' heads turning, their papers forgotten. Victor's smirk froze, his fingers pausing on his empty whiskey glass. For a split second, his eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise, maybe even respect, before he leaned back, his lips twitching into a half-smile. "Well, damn," he said, his voice softer than before. "You've got more spine than half the people I work with." Paul, Victor's assistant, shifted in his seat, his laptop screen dimming as he watched the exchange, his expression caught between amusement and unease. The executives exchanged quick glances, their murmurs silenced by the weight of Chloe's words. She held Victor's gaze, her brown eyes unflinching, years of swallowed insults and forced smiles fueling her resolve. "I'm not here to be your project," she added, her tone quieter now but no less firm. "I know who I am." The jet lurched through another pocket of turbulence, and Chloe gripped the armrest of an empty seat, her heart pounding not with fear but with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. Victor nodded slowly, his fingers tapping the glass. "Noted," he said, his voice carrying a rare hint of sincerity. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken tension, until the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their descent into London. Chloe turned back to the galley, her steps measured, but inside, her mind was racing. Victor's offer, flippant as it was, had cracked open a door she'd slammed shut years ago. Singing wasn't just a hobby, it was her lifeline, the part of her that once lit up smoky jazz clubs in Brooklyn, her voice weaving stories of love and loss that left crowds breathless. She thought of Lily, her 10-year-old daughter, who'd fall asleep to Chloe's lullabies, her tiny hand clutching the edge of the blanket. Singing was the thread that kept Chloe tethered to herself through years of late shifts, unpaid bills, and the weight of being a single mom. Victor's words, his casual assumption that she needed his help, stung because they echoed a fear she'd buried, that she'd lost that part of herself forever. In the galley, she leaned against the counter, her breath shallow. The stainless steel was cool under her palms, grounding her as she closed her eyes. She could still feel the rush of her last performance, 5 years ago, pregnant with Lily, her voice carrying every hope and fear for the future. The crowd had loved her, but afterward her ex had walked out, leaving her with a stack of bills and a baby on the way. Singing became a luxury she couldn't afford, replaced by the grind of survival. Yet even now, she hummed to Lily at night, her voice soft and steady, a quiet rebellion against the life that tried to silence her. Victor's offer, however manipulative, had stirred that rebellion into something fiercer, a need to reclaim what was hers. The jet's descent grew steeper, the cabin tilting slightly as the landing gear hummed. Chloe busied herself, wiping down the counter, her hands moving on autopilot. Paul appeared in the galley doorway, his laptop tucked under his arm. "You didn't have to take him on like that," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Victor's not used to people pushing back." Chloe glanced at him, her expression calm but guarded. "I'm not here to make him comfortable," she said, tossing a rag into the sink. Paul gave a small, appreciative nod. "I can see that. For what it's worth, I'd bet you're one hell of a singer." His words caught her off guard, and for a moment she felt seen, not as the waitress, but as Chloe, the woman who once commanded a stage. She nodded, her throat tight. "Thanks," she said, and he turned back to the cabin, leaving her with the echo of his kindness. As the jet touched down in London, the cabin filled with the rustle of coats and the click of briefcases. Chloe moved through her routine, clearing glasses and offering water, her apron still crisp despite the long flight. The executives filed out, their thanks curt but polite, their minds already on their next meeting. Victor lingered, adjusting his tailored jacket, his presence commanding even in silence. He stopped at the door, turning to her. "Chloe," he said, his voice stripped of its earlier edge. "If you ever take that stage again, I'd like to hear it. No strings." It wasn't an apology, but it was close, an acknowledgement that she'd shaken him, that she wasn't just a prop in his world. She met his gaze, her face unreadable. "Maybe you will," she said, her tone even, giving nothing away. He gave a small nod, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer before he stepped into the grey London morning, his silhouette swallowed by the mist. Alone in the empty cabin, Chloe sank into a seat, the hum of the jet fading into silence. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone, scrolling to a photo of Lily, her gap-toothed smile lighting up the screen. The sight of her daughter grounded her, but Victor's words kept circling. "You ever miss it? The stage?" She opened a browser, her thumbs hesitant but sure, and typed Open Mic Nights London. A list popped up, venues not unlike the ones she'd sung in years ago. One caught her eye, a jazz club called the Blue Note, small and intimate, hosting a showcase the next night. Her heart thudded as she clicked the sign-up link, the decision feeling both reckless and right. She thought of Victor's laugh, his smug assumptions, and then of Lily's voice, begging for one more song at bedtime. This wasn't about proving him wrong, it was about proving herself right. The next evening, Chloe stood backstage at the Blue Note, a borrowed black dress clinging to her frame, her dark hair loose and catching the dim light. The air smelled of whiskey and anticipation, the crowd's murmur a low hum beyond the heavy curtain. Her hands shook as she adjusted the microphone stand, the weight of years off stage pressing against her chest. She hadn't sung in public since before Lily was born, since the night her ex walked out, leaving her with nothing but debt and a dream she couldn't afford. The stage manager, a wiry woman with a kind smile, gave her a nod. "You're up next," she said, her voice soft but encouraging. Chloe's stomach twisted, but she nodded back, her fingers brushing the hem of her dress. The pianist, a gray-haired man with gentle eyes, leaned over from his bench. "What's your song?" he asked, his fingers hovering over the keys. "Summertime," Chloe said, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, nodding. Good choice. Let's make it sing. The opening chords drifted out, slow and soulful, and Chloe stepped into the spotlight, the heat of it warming her skin. The crowd hushed, glasses pausing mid-sip, eyes locking on her. Her first note was low, rich, curling around the melody like smoke, carrying the weight of every late night, every sacrifice, every moment she'd chosen Lily over herself. Her voice grew, filling the room with a raw, aching power that seemed to surprise even her. The lyrics weren't just sung, they were lived, each word a piece of her story, her struggles, her love, her resilience. The crowd leaned in, captivated, some swaying, others frozen, their faces soft with awe. Chloe's voice soared, hitting notes she hadn't touched in years, her body swaying slightly as she lost herself in the music. The pianist followed her lead, his chords weaving seamlessly with her melody, amplifying the emotion in her voice. For those 4 minutes, the world was hers. No jet, no Victor, no bills, just the music and the truth it carried. As the final note faded, the room erupted, applause roaring through the small space, some standing, others shouting for an encore. Chloe's eyes stung, but she smiled, her chest light, her hands trembling with the rush of being heard. She bowed slightly, the crowd's cheers washing over her like a wave. Backstage, she caught her breath, her heart still racing. The stage manager approached, her eyes bright. "That was something else," she said, pressing a business card into Chloe's hand. "We'd love to have you back. Regular slot if you want it." Chloe nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Another performer, a young guitarist with a shy smile, clapped her on the shoulder. "You own that stage," he said, and Chloe managed a laugh, the sound foreign but freeing. As she left the club, the cool London air hit her face, and she felt like she was stepping into a new version of herself. Not the waitress, not just the mom, but Chloe, the woman who sang her truth. Weeks later, back in New York, a video of her performance surfaced online, uploaded by a stranger in the crowd. It spread fast, her voice resonating across social media, comments piling up calling her a hidden gem, a voice that deserved to be heard. Some praised her raw emotion, others shared stories of their own dreams put on hold. Chloe scrolled through the comments on her phone, Lily curled up beside her on their worn couch. "That's you, Mommy," Lily said, her eyes wide with pride, pointing at the screen. Chloe kissed her forehead, her chest tight with gratitude. One message from an anonymous account stood out, "Knew you had it in you. Don't stop." She smiled, suspecting it was Victor but not caring. She didn't need his validation, or anyone's. The next weekend, Chloe booked another gig, this time at a Brooklyn club she'd performed at years ago. She brought Lily, who sat in the front row, her gap-toothed smile brighter than the stage lights. As Chloe took the stage, her daughter's cheer rose above the crowd, a sound that anchored her. She sang again, her voice stronger now, each note a step toward the woman she was becoming. The crowd's applause was warm, but it was Lily's proud gaze that mattered most. Chloe knew, no matter what came next, more gigs, more videos, or just quiet nights singing to her daughter, she'd already reclaimed what was hers. She'd sung for herself, for Lily, for the life she was building, and that was enough. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little courage today, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel.